So I think I'll get started because I can talk for a long time about just about anything relating to gardening. Even on a snowy evening, as I'm coming in to Okotoks, the snowflakes are wafting around, so even on a snowy evening I can talk gardening. I'm Janet Melrose, and I'm Calgary's cottage gardener, and I have what I call a micro business because it's me. In one of my former lives, I managed a ton of people, so after that I said, no, I'll just manage me, that's hard enough. And I specialize in garden education and horticultural therapy. So I do a lot of programming with folks living with various disabilities, from mental health to physical health, cognitive health, and just general well-being. So anytime I come and talk to people, as far as I'm concerned, we're doing garden therapy anyway, even if it's only virtually. And we all go away hopefully feeling a little bit happier about life, snow and all, and a little bit more wanting to get in the soil and do things ourselves. So does anybody, when you came here, what were you wanting to learn? Like, it's advertised as seeds, but just anything specific that you were in for? Or just generally whatever I wanted to offer?
Well, okay, I have a hard time growing anything in this dirt.
Okay, all right, so we can talk a little bit about that, all right?
It's the same soil. I know how crucial soil is,
Yep.
and I've worked it before, but I don't know if I'm doing it.
Okay, we won't spend too much on soil because we're more on seeds, but I'll certainly get into that. All right, so what I've called this, let's put this up here. All right, so I've called this seeds starting from the beginning, because literally seeds is the beginning of all gardening, besides soil. And so it's, for me, it's literally when spring starts coming out, seeds for me are like the magic of plants every year. Because for me, seeds are this little miraculous baby that comes to life. In our world, we tend to view seeds and things like that as this inanimate object, but really a seed is a living entity. So for starters, what's this?
Coconut.
Coconut. What else is it? It is actually, it is a seed. This is one of the world's largest seeds, all right? And it's a perfect example of a seed that we tend to not even think of as anything particular. It's an edible for us to eat. So seed literally is how most plants reproduce. The odd one reproduces by spores, and a few others will reproduce only by their roots and stuff like that. But for the most part, the angiosperms, which are flowering plants, all reproduce by seed. And literally, we think of seeds as perhaps a bean seed or a lettuce seed. But when you think about it, seeds are peas. We just call them peas, right? But those are pea seeds. We call apples. We call it apple seed, but we also call them pips. We call plum stones. We have all sorts of names for what is a seed. So when you look at things now, you can say, all right, what type of seed are you? And they've got, if you classify seeds botanically, there are about 10 different variations on themes. But for the most part, a seed is literally the shell, just like our own skin, that contains all the goodies inside. Sometimes the seed shell, or areole as they call it, is kind of thin, and sometimes it's really thick. So this is one of the thickest, all right? You need a hammer to break this dude out. But literally its purpose is to contain the goodies inside. And the goodies inside are a plant embryo. So it's baby plant, just ready, waiting to go. And the rest of it is all its food. And when you buy a coconut, or in my case, because I was born in the Caribbean, it landed on your head. It's heavy, it sloshes, and it doesn't do this, all right? It's got some heft to it. But if I bought this coconut from wherever about a year ago, now it's very lightweight. So all of the water has been used up, and the plant food has been used up by the baby embryo, all right? Because the seeds breathe. They're not inanimate. They literally have, they're doing respiratory, they're breathing, they're using their food slowly, but they're using it. So the longer you leave these guys, the less food they have. So when you look at that screen, what is the joker in the pack? Which one is not a seed? We've got petunias, we've got pea seeds, we've got green beans, green peas, we've got broccoli, carrots, beets. Potato. Yeah, a potato is not a seed, all right? It's an extension of the plant stem, and it is usually, for us, cloned, but every so often on a potato, last year we saw them a lot, you'll see these little green things on top of the potato. That is the fruit of the potato, and inside is the seeds itself. So even potatoes have seeds. Don't ever eat potato fruit, by the way. They kill you off very quickly. All right? Highly poisonous. All right? All plants in the tomato family, so potatoes, petunias, eggplant, don't eat the foliage. It contains a lot of alkaloids that's not good for us. So, good seeds, healthy seeds, not this guy because I've left him hanging around too long, they are mature. So when we are purchasing seeds, when we're collecting seeds, when we're storing them, we actually have a leap of faith for most times. Unless you're actually growing plants to seed them, to collect them for their own seed, you are hoping that the seeds that you get when they were gathered were mature. Because a plant where the seed has been collected when it's immature, that seed will not germinate. It's immature, it's not fully developed, and it's just basically stuff. So, for instance, if you're the marigolds, you pull out the marigold, it's just finished flowering, you pull out that little flop, and there's all these, the white and green, and it's quite pliable. That's an immature seed. So if you cast those all over the place, nothing would happen. So healthy seeds, for us, need to be mature. They also need to be viable, and that's a fancy word, which means that they can germinate. In other words, they haven't been hanging around for so long that they're done. If I plant this coconut, nothing's going to happen. It's no longer viable. All right? So viable is one of those words that we want to pay attention to an awful lot. Because seeds, each one of them has different viability. Bean seeds tend to live maybe a year, 2 at the tops. Peas, maybe 3, but usually 1 or 2. Then you start going smaller and smaller, and they'll live longer. So for instance, spinach and chard, slightly bigger seeds, that's about 5 years. Lettuce is a little longer. Petunia is a little longer. Orchid seeds, 10 years. They're microscopic.
What about a mint seed?
Mint seeds?
They're teeny,
Pardon me?
They're teeny, teeny, tiny.
Teeny tiny, then chances are they're pretty darn good. So as a rule of thumb, bigger the seed, the shorter their lifespan, because they respire it out, okay? Weed seeds, they've taken some out of the pyramids, so 6,000 years ago, they're still viable. So one of the definitions for a weed seed for me is a long period of viability, all right? When we had the flood in Calgary, I went to visit a garden, community garden, and I was commenting on their beautiful morning glories, and they were glorious. And they said, well, the last time we planted morning glories was 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it just so happened that the flood brought all those seeds up to the surface of the soil, and bingo, they had morning glories. And since the flood, we have been dealing with prickly lettuce weeds like nothing else. It's a huge infestation because all of those seeds were buried, came to the surface, and they're viable. They're very viable. The other thing is they need to be vigorous. So you can have a seed that will germinate, all right, but then it struggles. It gets to the surface, and the next thing you know, it takes forever to do anything. So it's not particularly vigorous. All right, it's like somebody like me. Some days I'm not very vigorous when I get out of bed. I sort of roll out of bed, and then maybe I need 3 cups of coffee. And yet sometimes I can just jump out of bed, and 1 cup of coffee gets me going, right? So I'm vigorous, all right? So, and the other thing is size counts. If you've got a handful of seeds, those are nasturtium seeds in your bottom left corner, you can see all sorts of different sizes. And because, just like you and I, we all come in different sizes. But for seeds, bigger is better. All right? So if you've got a handful of seeds, I always go for the nice big plump ones first. And then if I got, the little teeny ones left, I might just put them in anyway. but it's the big ones that have most of the goodies in them, all right? So, where are we going to get our seeds? I thought I'll put this in right away because that's the first question, right? Where are we going to get our seeds? Because you can get seeds anywhere. You can get it at Dollarama, all right? 99 cents package. Maybe it's $1.25 now. But you can also pay a ton of money for seeds, all right? So to me, where I buy my seeds is important. And one of the reasons for that is that in the prairies, because we're encompassing South Alberta all the way around, all right? We got one of the weirdest climates going, all right? There was a thing in the paper today about right now Alberta has the world's biggest variability in temperatures right now. Go figure, yeah, 20-degree swing. So what we want are seeds that are were grown as close to us as possible. Okay, so if I have a choice of a little marvel pea seed, it's one of my favorite pea seeds. If I have the choice of purchasing that seed from China or Arizona or the UK, Ontario, or Calgary, guess which one I choose? Okay, I want to buy seeds that were grown, matured, collected right here in Alberta. Because even though all of those little marble pea seeds are the same, as in little marble peas, the ones that are closer to home are the ones that are the most successful for us. They're the hardiest for us. All right? So,
does it say on the package?
It won't say on the package. It's often the growers. So the label, what name is on there. All right? So for instance, one of the really big, what's a good one out of UK? Thompson and Morgan, for instance, or Fotheringills, okay? Those are seed companies out of England. I very rarely buy their seeds because those seeds were grown in England. Great country, I come from there, totally different climate, all right? Okay? Whereas, for instance, this one here, TNT seeds here, TNT seeds comes out of Manitoba, all right? So what I do, and what I'd say your homework then now, is you go onto the internet and you type in Canadian seed companies, and up will pop a whole bunch of them. So where do I get my seeds? I mostly get my seeds online, or I go to events like CD Saturday, and I buy them locally. So I am looking for seeds as close to home. And if I can grow and collect my own seeds, I do that too. And I do that a fair amount as well. So you're looking for healthy seeds close to home because then they're the hardiest for us. If we're looking for seed catalogues in our world, TNT from Manitoba is one of my favorites. Another one that is an absolute favorite for me is West Coast Seeds. Now West Coast Seeds is from BC. So they're on the island to boot, all right? So we're kind of chancing our luck, but these guys have a huge reputation. They're family owned, and that's what I trust. I've been there to visit their store on the island. So I'm able to talk to them. I'm able to test their stuff out. They've got a great record, and their catalog is to die for. It's a marvelous catalog. The only thing I don't pay attention to is the planting instructions. When it says, oh, plant in March for a harvest in April, I tend to say, forget that. We'll put it in June. All right? So that's the only difference. But
Do you also pay attention to the zone?
not necessarily. It depends on the variety. If it's annuals, I don't worry about zones at all. If it's perennial, then yes, I probably would. So for instance, Echinacea is a perennial. I know that it's zone 3, no worries, okay? But for anything that's an annual seed, I don't worry about it because it's meant to go fast, live and die, produce seed in the first year.
And are we too late to be ordering from seed
No,
catalogs?
not at all, okay? I've barely started some of my sowing right now indoors, so don't worry about that. To me, the only bad time is when you didn't do it at all. Okay, I planted a garden in August and got stuff out of it. So it's, it's what you choose, but you can do it, all right? So here's another package. This is Wild Rose Heritage Seeds. And they're from, I believe it's Brooks. think it's Brooks. But they're fairly new on the horizon. What I like about this is it's in a foil package. And foil packages, as opposed to paper, they can slow down the respiratory of the seeds themselves, so they'll last longer. So I do like the fact that they're using a foil package.
What's the name again?
Wild Rose Heritage Seed.
Heritage means something, doesn't it?
Yes, I don't, Lethbridge. Okay, here we go. Heritage means, if we're going to go there, all right, a heritage seed or an heirloom seed, all right. In Europe, they call them heritage. In North America, we call them heirloom. Okay, same difference. An heirloom seed is one that is open pollinated, which means that if you grow the plant and then you collect the seed, that what will pop up the next year is the same thing, give or take a few variations, okay? You know, as in when, are you guys married?
Yes.
All right, so when you guys have babies, they're recognizably looking like the two of you, okay? They don't have 6 arms, etc. Okay? All right? Okay? So an open pollinated seed is something where it comes back true to type, is what they call it. Okay? A hybrid seed, if you collect that seed, will not come back true to type. So if you have a fancy petunia, and I always used to use a purple polka dotted petunia with white, okay? And lo and behold, 2 years ago, they popped up on the market. All right. But if you collect the seed from that petunia, what you're going to get is one that's purple, one that's white, one that's muddy, yucky color, one that's this, that, and the other. And you may get one that's the one that it was before. So that's not true to type. All right? The other thing about an heirloom seed is that it has to have been around for at least 50 years. Now, they picked 50 years back in 1999. And they chose that date because in 1950 is when all of the hybrids showed up. So that's where the heirloom was the line. But now, 50 years ago makes it 1970, for instance. And often you have to have a story behind it. So you need to know that it comes from Aunt Martha's backyard over in Bassano, was passed down through the family, got given to Aunt Betty, who hung on to it, bless her socks. You know, and then there was a family dispute. You know, it's like a soap opera, right? All right. So most of the heritage seeds have some provenance. It's like an antique. You know where it comes from. Okay.
You know, I hear about it from my cousins that are gluten-free. You know, they have to buy, they go out and they buy 1920 wheat.
Yes, exactly.
And then they grind it and cook with it, and they're just
right.
fine.
Yes.
But for just all this stuff, does it make any difference?
Not particularly. Not particularly. The name heritage or heirloom is often now used as a buzzword, as a marketing tool. Okay, I happen to like middle marble peas, but the reason why I like them is because they grow nicely and I like what they taste like. So sometimes I'll go with heirloom seeds, but sometimes I'll use hybrids. So it doesn't matter, it's what you want, all right?
So can I use the seeds from a hybrid, and will a carrot, like if it was a carrot,
You
I'll
probably,
still grow a carrot?
you'll still get a carrot.
Okay.
It just probably won't look like the carrot that you had last year.
Okay.
Okay? All right, because what a hybrid means is that mankind has gone and mucked around with things and put things together that normally wouldn't be. All right? So they revert back to different types of genes is really what it is. But for our purposes, yeah, I use a mix. I use some heirloom, I use some hybrids. It's whatever I want. Okay? If I want a purple splashed white petunia, I'm buying a hybrid. Okay? All right? So it's just, but if I just want a little marble pea, I'll buy that. Often hybrid seeds are more expensive than open pollinated. All right? And that's because the people who make the hybrid seeds often will trademark them. They own them. They did the work. And so they hybridize them, and one of the things that they will often do is make them not viable. So you can collect the seeds and they won't grow anyway. Because when you create things and put things together, often things go. So for instance, roses, to get beautiful colors, we've lost our fragrance. Okay, all right. So you never get something for free, and often it's the viability that goes for seeds. All right.
Janet, one more question. Are all heirloom and heritage seeds open pollinated?
They have to be open pollinated.
Does it say on the package?
It will.
It
It
will
will.
say it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and but the interesting thing is, do your homework, because one famous seed company from the States that will remain unknown, had on the back of its package this famous heritage hybrid. Okay, which tells me that they don't know what the heck to do. So in other words, if it's something that I'm really caring for as an heirloom, I do my homework. Is this actually what they say it is? Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. In other words, you can't trust anybody, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's another one. This is Amers, all right, and it happens to come from Ontario. So you can get all sorts of different types of seeds. This one here, Norse seed, comes from Harmonic Herbs up in Barrhead, and I love their seeds because Barrhead has lousier climate than we do. So, okay, I really like their seeds. All right. This cute little package here called Butterscotch Bean. By the way, Butterscotch Bean is the one that's traditionally used for baked beans. Okay. I get these from Prairie Seed, and he's out of Saskatchewan. And Jim Tournier, the original owner, was one of the co-founders of Seeds of Diversity. So that slogan at the bottom there. And Seeds of Diversity is the Canadian version of the American Seed Savers Exchange. So it's a little smaller and established 40 years ago now. But their mission is to collect and preserve all of the seeds that have come around. So you see all sorts of different information. It's a great website if you're interested in seeds. Jim Tournier was one of the co-founders, and now his daughter Rachel has taken over. So once again, we have a history, and we can talk to these folks. I like Salt Spring Island Seeds because Dan Jansen, who is the owner, is passionate about things like peas and flax and things like that. And so he'll chat with you on the phone. Coriander, this is OSC. And once again, it's another Canadian seed company. So I'm mostly after my Canadian companies. And here's one of my favorites, which is West Coast Seeds. And I'm using them a lot right now because they do have a program for not-for-profit organizations. They will give last year's seeds to these guys for free. And so with my Hort Therapy programs, I'm benefiting from them. And so I like to give them a nod because, and I do like their seeds. If it's a good price, you get a decent amount. So that's where we can get lots of seeds, which isn't to say that if I'm in Superstore and I need some parsley seeds and they've got Burpee seeds, I buy them. All right? So the good seed companies like Burpee's, Mackenzie's, Stokes, all those guys, absolutely, they've got great reputations. The one place I don't get them from, Dollarama, okay? Because they don't say where those seeds are. I have no idea who owns those seeds except that it's from Dollarama. And I tend to avoid places where I see them not caring for their seeds. So they're in the hot sun or wherever. So I will often, if I'm purchasing seeds, go to a garden center rather than a box store. All right? And it's just the way that they go with. All right. So here's what we've been talking about. Get them. Get them where they're grown on the prairies. I didn't mention Casey's heirloom tomatoes. He's an heirloom. And he specializes in tomatoes and Asian veggies. Great. There's Jim Tournier's picture a few odd years ago now. And if you're interested in trees, shrubs that are from the prairies, for instance, then you go to Bow Point Nursery or BPN because they specialize on trees, shrubs that are grown on the prairies. They've done a little bit of hybridizing. They've got a great poplar. And also Saskatoon Farm, just outside of Okotoks, is doing some work on that. So that's the sort of thing where we do a little bit of research and care about our seeds. All right. So, germination. Because we tend, and I'm just as bad as everybody, okay? We tend to think, you're going to take the seed and we're plunk it in the ground and by golly, it better grow. Okay? And it's not as simple as that. It's just like us. We need a few things to live and to live properly. And one of them is water, handy dandy. Cape Town knows all about that, 50 liters per person per day. We need light, okay? So sunlight, and enough of it. When it's dead of winter, we're all sad because we're not getting enough sun. We need oxygen, and we need the right temperature range, okay? So right now we're grumbling, we're not germinating very well, and -14, okay? So seeds need that as well. So when we plant our seeds, we have to give them enough water, but not too much, So because they can drown, just like us. So they have to have water. And usually when you have a seed and you plant it, the first thing that will happen is that the water will start penetrating the outside of the shell and swell it up a little bit, and it starts cracking open. All right, so the water is being absorbed by the seed, and it's the first stage of growth. It needs oxygen. It can't grow in no light and no air at all. But most importantly, it needs the proper soil temperature. And every seed is different. All right? What will work for one seed doesn't work for the other one. They all have an optimum range of temperature where they can grow. Let me just check. I just want to make sure, where am I going to... Okay. So, oh dear. All right. Ooh, where am I going? There we go. All right. So soil temperature in our world is extremely important because we have cold soils. All right. So if we're talking veggies, because they're the ones that have really specific germination requirements, if you have, let's see, by the end of June, it's now going to be spring. No, let's get a little more hopeful. Let's say by April the 15th, it starts shining, the snow's gone, and the soil is starting to warm up, and you can see it's starting to thaw. If you take the temperature of your soil, and you can do that, it's like an overgrown thermometer, and it's got metal on the outside so that you don't break it in the soil. But if you pop this into the soil, and it reads that the soil temperature is 2 degrees centigrade, then what will happen, you can plant some of the seeds that absolutely prefer to germinate in that type of temperature. So spinach, for instance, arugula, are two of the big ones that you would start. There's a reason why we call them early spring greens, right? All right. So when you plant our spinach and our arugula first thing in spring, and the temperature when we planted them was about 2 to 4 to 6 degrees, what will happen is that's the optimum temperature for those seeds to germinate. So when you plant them, they don't hang around because the soil is already at the right temperature. You've got some nice moisture, so they immediately will germinate within the germination dates of them. They will all grow vigorously because, once again, it's at the right temperature, and they're healthy. Whereas if you do it too soon, they hang around until the soil warms up. And if you do it when the soil is too warm, they hang around until the soil cools down. One year, I deliberately planted spinach in the middle of August just to see what would happen. And it sat in that soil and sat, and it germinated on September the 21st. The soil had cooled down, and so it was the temperature range. All right? So spinach is the earliest. Then you would plant your peas and your carrots and all the brassicas, the broccolis and cauliflowers and things like that. And then you get to beans. Beans are a warm season crop, and they need soil temperature a minimum of 15 degrees. All right. So if we plant our spinach and our beans on the same day, what happens? Neither of them will grow. One's too early and one's too late. All right. Okay. So we need to learn those temperature ranges, and one of the easiest tools on the web for us is if you go to Alberta Agriculture, just type in germination temperatures for Alberta, and up will pop a handy little chart with a lot of common vegetables and edibles, and it gives you an idea. But when I plant seeds in the soil, I'll often just pop my thermometer in to get my eye in or my hand in again, then I'll hold that soil. If there's a handful of soil and I almost immediately drop it, ouch, my hand's falling off because of the cold, it's a little too early to plant just about anything, all right? If you pick it up and it's pleasantly cool and moist, smells nice, most things are a good time to plant. If, on the other hand, it's nice and warm and comfy and it's like having a heating pad on your hand, okay, in goes some of your squashes and your beans and things like that. And this applies, by the way, to transplants, so seedlings as well as seeds, okay? And if you pick it up and it's like treading on sand, or you're in Mexico and you go, ooh, 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 okay? Way too hot for just about anything. So seeds need that range, okay? So that's most of what we want to know about germination. But sometimes you need to know if the seeds need special treatment. Because don't forget, they've got this hard surface. So some seeds need some extra to get them to do their thing. All right? So if you see a word on a seed catalog or in a book and it says stratification, it means it needs to be exposed to cold. All right? So most of the northern temperate varieties, which we like to grow, they like having a little extra cold. So you can stick them in the fridge for a while, a couple of weeks. All right? Most of our common edibles and annuals, like marigolds and things like that, are not that fussy. Okay? But every so often you'll come across one where it says needs to be stratified for 6 weeks at such and such a temperature. Just stick them in the fridge. All right?
Sweet peas.
Sweet peas are one of them. Okay? By the way, in Florida, they can't grow tulips. It doesn't get cold enough. Okay? So that's an example of these guys need stratification. The cold, they can't get it. Scarification, it sounds like a really scary term, but usually that applies to something that's in a fruit where the bird is going to eat it and then poop it out somewhere down the street. Okay, so the acids in their tummy scarify the seeds and then they're ready to germinate. So in other words, that plant figured out, well, they don't want to have all the plants just here. They want to have them widespread so the birds come and get them and the acid breaks down the coat. You can also put them in vinegar, or you can get a little bit of sandpaper and sort of, you know, basically you're just scarring the surface of some of these seeds. Morning glories are a perfect example. If you look at morning glories, they're these little hard, knobby seeds. And if all you do is plant them, they'll wait there forever or till the next flood. And, yeah, bingo. And so give them a little extra scarification, they'll germinate a lot faster. Imbibation, which really means to drink. So some seeds do better if you soak them a little bit. Peas are a perfect example. And what that does is it pre-swells the seed and gets things moving. Some like light, some need dark, and some absolutely need dark. For years and years, I tried to grow pansies from seed. Nothing ever happened. Then one day I read the package, and it says, cannot be exposed to light. Go figure. All right, so that's why I could never grow pansies. So when you think about it, most are not that fussy, okay? They drop their seeds, sometimes it gets buried, sometimes not. But some of them will say, absolutely must be exposed to light, and those are often the smallest seeds because they just lie on the surface of the soil. Some of them have to be in the dark. And it's occasional, but if you're not having success with a seed, go ahead and just read and find out if there's something else, i.e. me with the pansies. Okay? All right, so if we're going to grow seeds indoors, and I love doing it, it's an addictive thing, by the way, guys. I give you due warning. It's a really good thing for us to do because you can get a jump start on a lot of different things, and you can keep doing it all the way through the summer. You don't have to stop just because the garden magazines say you're supposed to be outside now. So once again, in indoors, you're controlling a lot of the conditions. You're giving them the light, you're giving them the heat, the air, all sorts of different things. One thing that we as gardeners love to do is we like to buy gadgets, all right? And indoor growing is a perfect example of Gadget City. Anybody got shares in Lee Valley? All right, okay. So you can be sold down the river and you can buy containers and flats and trays and song mixes and lights and stands and heating mats, this, that, and the other, okay? And you can have something that looks like that over there, that picture on the right-hand side, which, by the way, is Lord Strathcona's high school, all right? So they can afford it, all right? Okay, but it doesn't have to be expensive. So, for instance, you're told you need to have seed starting mix. I don't use seed starting mix because I found that one little bag at $10 was not that much better quality, and so what I use is just potting soil. So I get about 3 times as much for the same price, but it's decent potting soil, all right? I'll talk a little bit more about that. So you can improvise. You don't have to have a fancy container. You can have a milk jug, or a Swiss chalet container. Check out Chicken Thing. I get these from the dumpster, the recycling places outside of garden centers, okay? So I never buy a container if I can help it, okay? Other than the milk, I suppose. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't need a $2,000 setup, nor would I encourage you to start with one. Kijiji's littered with all of those things where people spent $2,000 on a seed starting cap and found that it wasn't for them. So start small. So something like this, you can improvise. So all that is, I figured that must be an IKEA setup, you know, like the Ivar for IKEA. So some fairly cheap lumber. And all they've done is just made a wooden thing, put it in front of some windows, which we'll talk about. You can make pots out of newspaper. If you want a heating pad for your seeds because it helps germinate them, then you can make your own. How about a little heating pad from Shoppers Drug Mart? Okay? Or you can take one of those white coils for Christmas lights and put it in some sand. That's a heating pad. You don't have to spend $40 on it, okay? It's what works for you. The important thing is that it's clean and hygienic. Not necessarily sterilized, but it should always be clean because you don't want to bring into the situation any possibility of diseases. All right? So the one thing I am absolutely careful about is that everything I use has been washed out with some soap. And if there happen to be any diseases popping in when I was doing it, I'll put it in a 10% bleach solution, just like a scout camp where you're supposed to rinse them all in 10% bleach. Does the same thing. I always wondered at the end of the line how sterilized those were. Anyway, because anytime you're growing stuff indoors, there is the potential for pathogens, just like there is outdoors. It just always seems more dramatic indoors. And most of the problems that we get is something called damping off, which is a fungus. There's about 500 that we call damping off. And it literally comes in and you go for work at 8 o'clock in the morning and everything looks happy. And then you come home at 5 in the afternoon and they're all lying on the ground. It's that fast and it's very contagious. Most of the time you get this because you're overwatering, okay? Or you didn't give it any air, or the oxygen was cut off a little bit. So your conditions for germination and growth were kind of out of kilter. And the big one for us is water. We love to overwater things. Because we're such a dry climate, we overcompensate. So if you are doing something like this, and you see water dripping down the insides of the container, that's a little too much water. It's perfect conditions for funguses to grow. But you can do a few odd things to prevent it. For starters, you can use cinnamon on the surface of the soil, because cinnamon is a natural fungicide. All right, bark of the cinnamon tree, and you get it from Bulk Barn or Dollar, or this one's Costco. And all I do is I take my cinnamon and I use one of those little sieves or a tea diffuser. You don't need a lot, and I just sprinkle all over the surface of the soil. And it is a deterrent to fungus getting established. Okay? The other thing that I do is I'll water with chamomile tea. Okay, once again, it's another natural fungicide. And so I'll make myself a cup of chamomile tea, and then I'll just use the grounds and make another pot, and that's the water that I'll use for some of my seedlings. It just does a nice little job of keeping things under control. But the big one is that you don't overwater, okay? Yes, the soil needs to be damp, but it doesn't have to be sopping wet. In fact, it shouldn't be, all right? All sorts of bad things happen. We're not going to talk too much about pathogens. Just know that if you get involved in it, at least once you'll have an episode, okay?
Will you be talking about how to water?
Yes, I could do that. Actually,
And I mean that because,
yeah,
like,
we can do
you
that now.
accidentally put too much in and then you have a full
So-
mess and you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
now what am I
this-
going to do?
Gotta
Yes,
start over, I don't
Yeah.
know where the seeds
These are-
went.
yeah. So other things, we'll talk about light. Before we get to water, I'll talk about light. The one thing in Alberta is all of the good books for seed starting will tell you that you can use a window, all right? Without exception, all of those books were written in Florida. All right? I'm sure of it. Okay? Because when you think about our windows, They're double, triple glazed. They've got argon in the middle. They've got gold. They've got gosh knows what else in them. What happens is the light hits all that and stops dead. So it looks light in our kitchens or wherever we're growing them, but there's no energy, all right? So it's light but no sunlight, okay? The other thing is that for when we usually do this, the sun is in the sky down here and it's short daylight. So the light's coming in like this. It's not like this, all right? So I never use windows to germinate seeds. I'll put plants on my windowsills and I'll put herbs and things like that, but I don't germinate my plants. Because one of the things that will happen is you'll get stretched seedlings. The fancy word is exfoliated. And what happens is that the plants are stretching, trying to find light. Please, I need light. And so you get these long, skinny things and the little leaf and the little long, skinny thing. Okay, that's because there's not enough light or it's too far away. So I always use grow lights. This one is an LED. Okay, so it's a very bright, clear, yes, I don't want to blind you, but it's a very bright, clear, and a little cool on the spectrum, okay? They're about twice the price of the usual fluorescent ones, but they last about 3 times longer, all right? And they don't heat up as much. And if I drop them, which I regularly do, I don't tend to break them, okay, which is kind of handy, especially if it's a cat that's knocked it over.
So are these fluorescent lights the same as this?
No, it's a different
different.
spectrum.
Okay.
Did I break this? See, so this is a warmer light. Once again, I don't want to. So it's a warmer light. It's got a little heat to it, and once again, it gives a nice little light here. So the trick about lights is you need to use a grow light scenario. If someone, by the way, gives you a free fluorescent light, try it out, see if it works. All right? Okay? Mm-hmm.
So I know a little bit about lights, being an electrician.
Good.
Because the light is important.
Yeah.
So the color is important.
Absolutely.
Right? And so when you're looking for lights, you want it to be a 5,000 K bulb or above.
Above, exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
often,
that's the color.
that's the color that you're looking
That's the
for.
color you're looking for is a 5,000 K. I actually have 6,500 K,
Even better.
which is close to a natural light.
Right, yeah. And some people will mix different colors if they're really getting into it, but I don't. I'm not that into it. I rely on a product called Sunblaster, by the way. I found that there to be a good grow light, and it's the T5 is what they're called. So thank you for that, because I am not a physicist. I flunked that subject. But so it is important to use your grow lights because you're spending a lot of time and energy, and it really looks, very discouraging if you're getting lousy growth because you're using a window or old lights or improper lights. All right, so that's often your stretch seedlings. Your water, I usually bottom water. And by the way, this little setup here is something called a nanoderm. And it's perfect to get started with grow lights. I've got about 12 of them. They're all running down my hallway right now. So to get down my hallway, I go sideways, because I'm addicted. But it's a handy little gadget because you get a tray and it's solid, so you're not going to wreck any wood or anything like that. It's got a clear plastic thing, which is built for putting the lights on, so you don't need a special stand or anything like that. The bad thing about it is that it's static, all right? So it's the height of this is always the same height. But plants that are just starting to germinate or even growing need to have the light approximately that far away from them, all right, when we're using grow lights. And so a lot of grow light situations are on pulleys so that we can start here and then as they grow plants you raise them up. But you can also improvise, and that's what I do with this, is I'll start off my seeds on something like this upside down, put this on top, and now it's the perfect height. So you don't necessarily need to go to a fancier system until you figure out your technique and whether you like doing this, because it's not for everybody. All right, so that's one way to get around it. In terms of water, this is perfect. I just bottom water. Okay, so very rarely will I actually top water. And if I do, it's because I've forgotten to water them and the plants are lying on the ground and I need to give them something real fast to perk them up. But bottom watering is much better because you can't oversaturate the plants as easily. Okay, so I do bottom water all the time.
Even when you first plant them.
Even when I first seed
How
them.
much water do you put in?
I have it so that it's covering. So what I'll do is I'll water. I'll wait to see the plants, the pots tick up the water, and usually then I'll add just a little extra. All right, because you don't want to just do it once a week, because now you've flooded them. Okay, and then they're famine by the time you're done. So you can count on watering every couple of days. Usually, is what I tend to do. But it depends on your house. What's temperature? All right, if my husband had his way, the house temperature would be approximately 30. All right, the plants are going to need watering more. If I had my way, it'd be about 15. Okay, so, all right, and which takes us temperature. You got to have a consistent temperature. All right, so if you're going from 15 to 30 and back down again every time someone goes past the thermostat, then the plants get themselves all confused and they don't grow as well. So for my house, we've compromised and it's 20. He puts on extra sweaters and I take off stuff. So, and the plants are happy, okay? All right, so you've got to have a fairly consistent temperature, all right? Some people get worried about seed shells being stuck on, and that's primarily your hard shells, buckwheat and sunflowers. If you don't like it, you just pull them off, just pry them off, but usually they just fall off in time. In nature they did, so why should we care too much? Nutrient deficiencies happens once these plants get further along. Because don't forget, what did I say about the seeds? It has enough food to germinate until such time as the leaves are up, and that's when they start to photosynthesize. At that point is when you start worrying about some nutrients, because potting soil doesn't have nutrients, okay? So seeds come with a bunch of stuff, but when you're starting to grow them on, now you need to start adding in some nutrients. And I call it nutrients as opposed to fertilizer, because I'm looking to add nutrients into the system. So this guy here is growing in some water, which looks terrible, but it's an organic fertilizer that's got lots of fishy stuff in it. All right, so once it got past a certain stage, I'm growing this guy hydroponically, by the way. I've got lots of nutrients in the water, so we need to add those nutrients into the soil. And what I recommend, so that you don't forget, is I use a really dilute version. So if you purchase something that's an organic liquid fertilizer, which is my preferred for growing seeds, then I will cut the dilution down by half, 2/3, even more, and water every time with it in. That way I never forget, and I watch the plants, because the plants will tell you. They'll tell you if they're starved or something. They turn a little yellow, means that they don't have enough nitrogen. They turn purple, they got a little bit of this. But the big one is the nitrogen, especially in the small stage. So if they're looking happy, you can tell, just like your kid. You look at your kid and you say, you're sick, you know, or you're happy, you're healthy. We can start to see that in our plants. All right, so if they're looking happy and healthy, everything's doing well, so don't get too much. The watering, keep the soil slightly on the drier side than the wetter side. Okay, so to me, what I like to do is I'll poke my finger in the soil, and if I can feel the moisture just on the surface of my finger, wait another day. If it comes out and it's sort of a little dry, maybe I'll wait another day, but if it's dripping wet, we've got problems, okay? Things like a little bit of air inside the soil as well as the water, so it's a balancing act, and you'll start to get the feel for that, all right? Okay, so these are some tips. So always, when you're starting to sow seeds, pick the easy ones. Don't pick Morning Glory versus peas, all right? Pick the easy ones. You want some success. Use fresh seed, as in the seed that you purchased this year from a good place, as opposed to the stuff Grandma said, try it. And it was in her house for 50 years too, okay? Make a chart. I planted this here and it did this for next year. Make sure we clean those containers we're going to use. And I use a really decent potting soil. And right now my current favorite is ProMix, and it does change. But really what I'm looking for, I don't want anything with moisture microbeads, nor do I need to know that it's got nutrients for the next 6 months, nor do I need to know that it's got this, that, or the other. All I'm looking for is a good, nice, fairly consistent mix, fairly lightweight. It will have peat in it for the most part, and a little bit of perlite. That's that white, the little white stuff. Perlite is like it's like exploded, okay, so it picks up and retains moisture. Sometimes it'll have vermiculite, which I don't like because it sops up water and hangs onto it for too long. All right. Sometimes it will have little bits of twig. Toss them out. You don't want to have wood in this. All right. So the big bits you toss out. But if it's got too much wood in, don't use it, because all of the soil microbes will start wanting to break down this wood, and it will actually draw away all of the nutrients out of the soil and your plants so that they can do their work. So a good soil mix for sowing doesn't have lots of twigs in it, all right? Which applies to outdoors too, by the way. So that's a decent potting soil. That's really what I'm looking for, all right? Don't pay too much. Now, if someone offers you 85 liters for $5, that's too much of a good deal, all right? Okay, and I got bit one year. I thought, oh, this is a marvelous deal. Every one of my plants had nitrogen inhibition, and I had to re-sow and regrow and then a different type, all right? So too cheap is too cheap, okay? You can use bottom heat if you want to, absolutely. And I do use a lot of chamomile tea, it's my preferred, and lots of cinnamon, and give lots of light, and a little fan, because these seedlings need to be moving a little bit, make them a little puff, okay? So a nice little fan.
So does that mean you take that plastic lid off every once in a while to
Yeah,
let it?
air you out, give it a little air, absolutely.
Like how often? Like once a day? Is it like taking out the
Yeah.
dog for a walk?
Yeah,
Or-
something like that, or
An
every
hour or
couple of
something?
days, or whenever
Okay.
you remember works too.
Yeah.
If you're really getting going, you'll have a little fan and you won't use these,
Oh,
okay? I like these because I have cats.
Oh,
Okay, I've lost way too many seedlings to seedlings being out like this, and I come home and they're down to the ground. All right, so I do like these for that purpose, but they won't keep out flies, for instance. Okay, just cats. Okay. Yeah, Patrick nearly was an ex-cat one day. But pat those seedlings, okay? So check things out. So when you've got things growing, don't view them from afar. Go and do this, okay? For starters, now you give them a little bit of a rough up, okay? And you're also checking them to see if there's anything healthy. How are the things doing? Are they feeling good? All right, so pet your seedlings and really monitor, okay? Because when we're doing it indoors, we're kind of pushing our luck a little. Because plants want to be outdoors, right? But it's a good way to get to your tomatoes. There's not a hope we'd grow tomatoes in our world if we didn't grow them indoors. All right, so here's another technique for us, and this is winter sowing. And in Calgary, I call it anytime sowing, all right? So this has been outside since January, and it's frozen solid, all right? And what will happen, the seeds that are in here, and they happen to be lettuce, will germinate. They will germinate at the right time, when the soil is at the right temperature, and when there's enough moisture, and enough light, and warmth in the air, and the time is right, and they will germinate. So,
Do you have that buried or just sitting on?
just on top, yeah. In the good books, it will tell you to bury it in the soil, but in Calgary, and as you guys know, this year we've got tons of snow, but last year or the year before we had none, and it still worked, okay? So it doesn't matter. So you use a very handy, expensive case, okay, that used to be a milk jug, all right? So what this now is, it's a passive greenhouse, okay? So because every so often we do happen to get a spring day where it rains and rains and rains, and you don't want to have soup in your passive greenhouse, you put a lot of holes. I use this, which is a carpenter's awl. It's my favorite. It's a nice knob. I used a darning needle once, and it nearly went into my hand instead of in the jug. Then you take the top off and throw it out. You're not trying to keep things warm in here, all right? But you need the top off so that the air can exchange. And if it is hot, that the heat can come out. But it's not enough. You need to add more. And so what I usually do is with a very dangerous implement. I was doing this with a couple of daycare kids the other day. I was doing this bit. All right. So now you've got lots of air exchange and for snow to get in and rain and stuff like that. But it's mostly the air exchange that I'm looking for. Now the next thing is we've got to open it up, because has anybody tried to fill one of these with soil and through this top and then put seeds in nicely? So you need to open it up, but you don't open it up too shallowy. Shallowy, is that a word? You open it up so that there's a minimum of 4 inches, because these containers will have roots fill the entire container when they're ready to be planted. So think about the little 6-packs that you get at Home Depot. That's only that much root. Okay? This whole thing will be filled with roots. And so now you have a container. And if you take care of your container, and you put it in the shed in the summertime so the plastic doesn't get too brittle, you can use this for 3 or 4 years. Okay? So then what I do is try not to get soil in here. So now I fill it up with, if I'm very smart, I pre-moisten my soil. Okay? The other way that I do it is I'll make these containers and I'll fill it up with soil, and then I'll sit them in the bathtub with some water in the bottom, and then the water just gets wicked up into the soil. I especially like doing this, and I fill up the bathtub with about 8 jugs or 10 jugs. When my son needs to leave early the next morning and he wants to have a shower, it's fun because he yells. I like teasing my son. And that's because Patrick is his cat, so it's his problem. Patrick is a very nice cat, but he's a heck of a cat. So what I like to do is, we've got a lovely deep container, okay? Look at all the soil that these roots are going to go into. I pretend that this is one of these. So I'll do this. And now I've got 6 little planting areas. Because if you put an entire package of marigold seeds in here, what's going to happen? They'll all germinate, and they'll all look like a chia pet. Okay, so now you have to split out all of these little seedlings. It's not going to happen. All right, so we've got to be careful with our seeds. So I've got 6 little holes, and then I'm going to take some seeds. I've decided we're going to go broccoli. And the only thing that I control in this thing, this mechanism, when we're doing it indoors, we're controlling a ton of variables, right? Light, air, temperature. All we're controlling really is space, right? So I'll put 2 seedlings in each, 2 seeds in each hole, okay? 1 for luck, okay? Most of the time, they'll both germinate, then I will pull out the one that's the weakest, okay? You got to be tough when you're using seeds, okay? Okay. Broccoli seeds are, anything in the brassica family, by the way, is little round seeds. You can always tell what they look like. But a kale seed and a broccoli seed and a kohlrabi seed all look the same. Now, each seed needs to be planted at the depth that it's supposed to be, right? On the seed package, it will say 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch on the surface. You're not going to plant these deeper, because one of the things that Calgarians and Albertans like to do is they figure, oh, it's cold, so I'll just push it down a little further. That will protect it. So you put a carrot seed 2 inches into the ground. All right, so someone asked me many years ago, they said, what happens if you plant your seeds too much? And here I am preparing this answer that would have been about 5 minutes, about, growing and etc. And the kid beside me said they die. I went, bonus. Because literally, they've used too much of their food to get to the surface. So they poop out. Or they might break the soil, and then they say, oh, and poop out. Okay, so I covered up with a little bit of soil, just to the depth that they're supposed to be. Now, here's the tricky part, and by the way, I've got about 50 of them in my backyard right now. Okay, and I use broccoli. So I write the name of what it is in the middle, inside, okay, as insurance, but because I can't read backwards and upside down, I also write it on the outside. Okay, because when you're sowing petunias, what time are we at?
Oh, it's 7:30.
Okay, good. When you're sowing petunias and you've got 6 different colors, the seedlings all look the same, don't they? So it's a good idea to label. You're growing broccoli and kale and collards and kohlrabi and this, that, and the other, and they all look the same. So what are you going to do? So please label. It's much better. Then I take it all together again, because I don't want it spilling or Patrick knocking it over, because he likes to knock these around the yard. He thinks they're fun. And I do use post office tape, by the way, as a plug for the post office, because it's good tape and it doesn't rip and tear. I hate tape that just sort of disappears. Okay, so it's decent tape and you use less. So there's my plug for the post office. So now you're done. So for 25 cents, some soil, a few seeds, you've now got 6 seedlings, probably 12, that are going to cost you $3, $4 from the superstore or Home Depot. Okay.
So you can do that today and put
You
them
can do it today, absolutely. I've been doing it since January. Okay, and I picked January because Christmas is done.
So these
Okay.
are the seeds that you don't have to, that you could propagate right into your garden too.
That's
You're
right.
just getting a head start.
You're getting a head start. You're controlling it around a little bit, so they are going to germinate a little bit faster. And typically, around about April the 12th, I'll start to see them all popping up. Okay, depending on who it is. Spinach comes first because they like the soil cooler, etc., etc. And I do all sorts of things here. I'll do flowers, I'll do perennials, I've even done hardwood cuttings, lots of my veggies for sure, because those are the seedlings. But annuals cost a ton of money. This is a really good way to do it. The bonus as well is that they are already hardened off. So our seedlings don't need to be hardened off. Okay? Plus very little chance of the pathogens, disease, ants getting into them.
And so when do you put them in the garden?
You put them in the garden when the time is right.
Okay.
July. Okay? All right. May, whenever. Okay? So they will germinate, they'll grow into little seedlings. Depending on your spring, it could be that they said, okay, it's time to grow, and they're starting to come up the top. Okay, now you pop them on, because you're not ready to put them in the garden, for instance. Or you can put them directly in, or I forget about it and I harvest the spinach right out of the container, okay? So it's very versatile, all right? I also use these to grow my squash, and my beans, okay? So at the end of April, typically, I will put 1 or 2 squash seeds in the middle and let them grow, because by now they don't freeze, so they're starting to grow. June 10th, there'll be a nice seedling, and you take the entire thing out of the container, plunk it into where you're going to grow it, and you've got a really good heart start, as opposed to putting the seed in there. Okay? I do the same thing for pole beans, too, because they're a longer maturing thing.
Whereabouts do you put them? What's
Ah.
the prime spot in your backyard?
The prime spot is not in full sun, because you don't want things warming up too fast, nor in the Chinook winds. So on the shady side of a fence, underneath a tree, something like that works beautifully. So it's not awful conditions like the garage, no light, okay? But it's not the best conditions, because you want them to germinate when it's decent.
I'm on a northwest balcony where the wind and storms
Yeah.
come as well, and
Yeah.
when the sun is like doing
Yeah,
its
that's
thing.
it. Yeah.
Is that
That's
too
fine.
extreme or
No,
that?
no, try it and see. The one thing as well is experiment. See what works. It could be that you're not going to be doing broccoli, but you get a ton of lettuces. Exactly. You see what I mean? Have some fun with it, okay? Because these plants want to grow. They want to live, you know, so they'll do their best, all right? Okay? So this just goes outside, all right? I don't water them, which is why I stick them in the bathtubs. They've got lots of moisture in the soil. The only time that I worry about them is if it's May the 5th or 24th, even better, and we get an Arctic blast and they're already seedling stage, in which case I cover them with blankets, just to give them that little protection. But it's a technique, it's a tool. Some people like it, some people want to do indoor sowing, okay? It's a technique. I also will grow extras in them, so that when the hail comes and flattens everything, I got extras. All right?
The snow would insulate a bit too.
Absolutely.
My balcony gets full.
Small snow, that's perfect insulator. So the reason why they would call it winter sowing is because of the cold, but also the snow is supposed to be that insulator. Okay? Except in Alberta, we never know if we're going to have snow or not. Or Chinooks. So now we're into direct sowing. And remember I was alluding to the fact of if you plant your spinach and beans at the same time, and what are we always told? When are we supposed to plant our gardens? May long weekend. Now, do you know why we're told to do it on May long weekend?
So when the frosts are fast?
No, it's because the garden center knows that if you plant it now, then you'll be buying more stuff on June 1st. Aren't I cynical? No.
My sister used to live in Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
She could plant things on the,
Yeah.
that May long weekend. And I live in Okotoks, and there was
Not
no
a
way it had to be June.
It has to be June, absolutely. It depends on your garden, quite honestly. I live in the bottom of a hill, and I have I'm at least a zone warmer than the guys at the top of the hill. Seriously. So it entirely depends on the condition, and for Alberta, it depends on the season. So my theory is I never plant anything on May long weekend because it's going to snow. Okay? So choose to make your sowing outside a prolonged 6-week affair. All right? That way you save your back. Okay? You're not planting a whole garden in one afternoon and going to see the massage guy the next day. All right? Spent $85. You could have spent it on seedlings, right? Okay, so direct sowing is one of the preferred ways, especially for things like root crops, because how has anybody transplanted a carrot yet? Successfully, okay? And yet the garden centers were selling them. 6 carrots for $2 last year. And they were this big. And I kept on thinking, now what? Okay, so direct sowing is our preferred technique for most things, absolutely. But I won't call it the only technique, it's another toolbox. So for instance, I can have my broccoli growing here that I transplant as seedlings. I could sow some broccoli seeds at the same time that I'm planting my broccoli seedlings. And I can be growing some more on after I planted these for later. So now I get 3 crops of the same thing. Okay, so think of everything that we've been talking about as a technique to get the most out of your gardens. Okay, we tend to think in Alberta that it's one crop. 1 crop of spinach, 1 crop of this, 1 crop of that. No, we should be looking to maximize what we're growing, all right? The only thing that's usually 1 crop is maybe potatoes. Okay, but I've got 2 crops of carrots out. Okay, so absolutely.
You planted your carrots or
No. I would have to use the pickups.
They get 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say weekend.
Yeah, exactly. No. The only carrots have been planted in little cups for the kids to see how carrots grow. Okay. So when you're doing direct sowing, the first thing to do is you say, I'm going to be planting this patch that's 6 feet long. I'm going to do it on Saturday. It's going to be a perfect day. It's going to be 18 above, nice blue sky, everything. So it's Wednesday. Water that garden. Okay? You want the soil to be wet, or at least damp, before you seed. All right? So it's a little bit of pre-thought. So I'm going to water my garden. So I've got 2 days so that all the moisture sinks into the ground and everything's cool. Then you come along and you sow your seeds. Now, you've got 2 ways in a garden bed to sow your seeds. One of them is the traditional way that I was brought up, is that you have a garden, a veggie bed, and it's, a nice rectangle, 8 foot long by 12 foot or whatever it might be. And you have a row of this and 2 feet and a row of something else. Okay, what's in the middle? Wasted space. Okay, plus what you tend to do is walk on it. All right, so it's a great place to compact all your soil. So, and clay soil compacts really nicely, doesn't it? And it's also a great place for weeds to grow. Whoopee! I love weeding. No. All right. But sometimes it makes sense to do it in rows. But in that case, make sure you're covering the soil with something to protect the soil and from your feet. So it could be things like wooden planks, burlap sacks. You could grow clover in there if you wanted to. All sorts of things, but don't make it bare soil, all right? The other way that you can look at is you can look at your garden and you can say, I'm going to plant in blocks, okay? And raised beds are a perfect way to do this, especially in Alberta because the soil warms up faster, okay? It cools down faster at the other end, but usually in October we don't care. So the soil is warming up faster for us. But the trick is you want to plan your garden so that you walk on the garden the least amount. So I often will plant in blocks now. Okay, it could be square foot gardening is 1 foot, but I find that a little too small for my liking, so it's usually 2 foot blocks. Okay, because I can reach 2 feet in. So in other words, you're trying to minimize the amount of damage you're doing to your soil and the amount of weed potential. Okay, and actually even planning the garden so that you don't shade something by something else. Okay, so when you're thinking of this, whether it's a community garden bed, 8x4, containers on your balcony, huge acreage, whatever, you want to plan it so that everything gets the same amount of sun, or as much sun as it possibly can. So don't plant your sunflowers on the south and expect that the beans on the north are going to grow very well. Do it the other way around. But it could be that you want to grow spinach in the middle of summer where it's supposedly too hot. So you're going to plant them on the other side of your peas so it's a little cooler, okay? So there's tricks and tips around that. But the thought, what I'm saying is think a little bit before you just do it. Because I've seen people and they've got their seeds and they just go, phew, and then that's how they plant them. Okay, so think about how you want things to grow, is all I'm saying. So pre-water, then don't do what this lady is doing, okay? She's in her bed, and what's she doing to the soil? She's compacting it, okay? And she hasn't watered, because I can tell from the picture, poor lady, okay? And spread that out, okay? Take advantage of the time that we've got. You should be harvesting your spinach at the same time that you're planting your tomatoes. Okay?
So if you put a 2 foot block inside a bed,
Yeah.
how much space do you put before the next 2 foot block?
Depends on how far I can reach in. Depends on the bed. If it's a big bed, then I probably would leave myself an alleyway wide enough that I don't fall and land on my beans. Okay? All right? But it depends on what you've got. But assuming it's an 8 by 4 bed, you can go all the way around it and not once put your feet in it.
So if I have an 8 by 4 bed and I do a 2 foot block,
Good. Yeah.
and how much space do I put
Oh.
between each 2 foot block?
Nothing. Essentially, it's just like this.
Oh,
Okay.
Right up, went up against
Yeah.
the other. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, which takes us actually to the next stop. In Alberta, we do not believe that the seeds that we plant will grow. Correct? Correct? Correct. All right. So, the package says that we have to plant them every 2 inches apart. Okay? So we do this. We go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then we've got this in our hand. We go Okay? We do this. I do this. We do not believe that our seeds will go. And it's also why we push them down too deep, because we figure it will protect against the heat, the cold temperatures or something, okay? So do pay attention to the fact of what that edible is going to look like as it matures size. Okay, so if you are planting a leek, its mature size will be this much space, right? All right, so you know that you've got to give one seed here and one seed here. If it's a bean, you need to give it more, okay? And so on and so forth. That way you're not going to use too much seeds. Because you know something? By the way, this is purslane. Resco Seeds is selling purslane. Okay?
What is that?
Purslane is a weed for us that's very edible. It's related to porch lacquer, actually. So I find it totally amusing that they're selling it. And it's actually tasty, because I've tried it, because I try all sorts of weird things. But you can get all sorts of things. But anyway, so do pay attention to this, okay? And plant them according to what you know is going to be the mature size. Because this is $2.99. I don't want to waste all of this when I only needed to use 3 or 4 seeds, okay? Now, the other thing that we were talking about, back up. So think about what a cabbage is going to look like, okay? What is this going to look like? And plant accordingly. You can plant a little thickly if you wish to, but know that you're creating yourself some work. So your carrots that you decided to use your entire package of carrots in 2 feet, you're going to be thinning those guys out, okay? So the one thing that happens is if we plant too thickly, then those plants are competing for space and food and light and water, just like the germination thing, and they won't grow properly. So we got to be a little ruthless or a little sparing. And I've moved with a great amount of training, okay, and mistakes to be sparing with my plants because I trust my seeds now. Now, your soil prep that you were talking about. Most of our soil is heavy clay, right? Right? For the most part, right? Make sure that when you're planting seeds, especially annual seeds, that you've amended your soil with a lot of compost, okay? So that the soil is easy to till, and so that the water can go into the soil easily, and yet not just puddle on the surface, nor drain straight through, all right? So we need something called the holy grail of gardening soil, loam, all right? And loam is mineral soil, clay, plus organic matter. So we constantly need to be adding compost, and a lot of it, okay? You need both. You can't just plant straight in compost either, okay? Because you use the minerals and everything else that's in the soil. But really amend your soil, and so that it's got some really nice tilth is the word, so it's easy to cultivate. And do that a couple of weeks ahead of time if you can. My preferred time to do that actually is in the fall, okay? Next best thing is in the spring, okay? And I always add in nutrients because sometimes the stuff that we put in our soil, i.e. compost, doesn't have a lot of nutrients. It's not sold with a nutrient grid. So I'll put in fertilizers. So it could be things like kelp meal or alfalfa meal, fish meal. It could be, I don't often use worm compost unless it's on balcony container type things because that's quite expensive. But it could be fish emulsion. I like using that. And lately I have gone to something called azomite, which is a ground up volcanic rock. It's ground up into a flour that contains a whole ton of micro minerals. And I'm seeing some results in my garden when I use this. The plants are healthier because they're getting all the minerals that they need. And guess what? Then we eat them, and so we get all the minerals that we need. So if it is a perennial bed, then I would use compost or manure or things like that. But for my edible beds, I usually go with the other types of fertilizers, so the kelps, the alfalfas, and things like that.
You just follow the instructions.
And always follow the instructions, please. With organic fertilizers and amendments, you cannot toxify your soil like you can with a synthetic fertilizer, but I don't just, yeah, I know better, okay? Okay, especially if you're getting to things like ammonium sulfur and things like that. But that's a whole new topic. But for seeding purposes, make sure you've warmed up your bed, that you've maybe tilled the bed, got out all of the weeds, everything looks pretty and nice and level. Then water, now seed. Okay, that's the best advice I can give you. And then once the plants have grown, okay, you'll notice when they are starting to grow and they're at a decent size, put a mulch down around them so that that will protect the soil and keep the soil moisture into the soil. Okay, not right close to the stems, but you know, in and around them. And it really does protect the soil and the soil temperatures, because roots don't like these fluctuating heat cold either. So if we keep the temperature in the soil the same temperature mostly, and keep that soil moisture, then your plants are healthier. Okay?
Mulch can just be like leaves.
It can be leaves, it can be straw, it can be ground up tax bills. That's a good mulch. I like that one. Okay. Anything that's, you know, I use burlap sacks sometimes, and I'll cut them up into strips if I want to, because burlap will degrade over a summer. Okay?
But you don't mulch until they come up?
And not when there's, yeah, after they're up and they're a decent size.
Okay.
Okay? You don't want to do it too soon, because the mulch could interfere with their germination and early growth. Okay? All right? So, now.
So having said that though, a lot of times when you're planting them, if you're doing them before,
Yeah.
you're planting them, they've already kind of
Come
grown,
on.
so you can
Yeah.
kind of plant them and then.
Yeah,
go
exactly.
through.
Yeah, for instance, if it's a fairly substantial seedling as opposed to a little seedling
Yeah.
germinating, yeah, pull away your mulch, pop it in there, let it establish itself,
Yeah.
and then you can put the mulch a little closer.
Yeah.
But I never put mulch touching stems, because that's a good way to bring in problems of various sorts, okay? So it should always have a little space around the plants. So usually it's in between the blocks that you might be growing, or in between pathways. Anywhere where there's significant bare soil is really what it comes down to it, okay? You can use rhubarb leaves. Rhubarb leaves is great mulch, okay? Just they're nice and thick, you know, you can cut them up into ribbons however you want to. You can plunk them right down on the soil, and they'll just disintegrate in the soil over the summer. So all sorts of things you can put in. Dried grass is another one, as long as there's no pesticides or herbicides on it, okay? All right, where were we? Oh, good. All right. So I'm going to leave you with some fun stuff. Okay? Because it's still snowing outside, and we want to do some germination, because otherwise we're going to go nuts. Oh, by the way, this here is a fancy thing for doing seeding, and it's got a water reservoir underneath it. So basically it's got capillary mats that will dip into the water, and it's a good way to keep your soil moisture nice and neat and tidy, but you can improvise. This is expensive, it was given to me. All right, but you can do the same thing with this on a capillary mat too, okay? So don't worry about that. So this is my microgreens. So these are pea shoots, and pea shoots right now are fabulously expensive at co-op, right? What, $5-6? Yeah, exactly. And they taste good. All right. So what I do for you can sprout almost anything and eat it as long as it's edible. Now, so in other words, you're not going to sprout potatoes. You eat the leaves, right? But a lot of things are edible and taste great. And microgreens are literally the seeds that have grown past the true leaf stage. So sprouts, so you know, you see the little sprouts, that's just, you're eating them just as they've started to sprout and put out the little radical root, is the first root, and then you eat them. Or they might have the stem, but they don't have the leaves. Whereas with microgreens, you want the leaves. And I like microgreens because I like seeing them grow. And it reminds me of of spring and how things grow.
Isn't it safer too?
It is safer, yes. Sprouts, you have to be very careful that you're not introducing the fungus. So what I've done is I've developed a technique where I don't use soil. I use a hemp mat. So it's basically the hemp palm, the remains after they've made rope and stuff like that. So it's biodegradable. So when you're done, you just stick it in a compost bin. And then what I do is I add some water, so that it gets soft, gets wet. That's probably a bit too much. You can use potting soil, absolutely, if you wish to. It works, okay? Just same principles apply as when you are doing indoor sowing. You don't want it too wet. But I like using this because I hate having to eat the soil that comes with these guys, okay? And what happens is, once these guys are grown, look at the roots. Look at the roots. That tells us how much plants grow and send out roots and everything. I just watered this. This is why this is a little on the wet side of life. Okay? And to eat these guys, you're just going to, with a pair of scissors, just chop them off at the base and eat them, right? Tons of nutrients, because guess what? All the nutrients come from the seeds.
And then do you just toss that thing out, or
Yeah,
you use it?
you don't use it again because it's impossible to clean.
Okay.
Okay.
Where do you get that?
I get those from, the mats I get from indoor growing places. So in Calgary, it would be Incredigrow or Quick Grow or Good Garden Centers sometimes. Okay, and then you take your seeds. Now, I often get my microgreen seeds from a place like, that's a local one called Mums from Manitoba. All right. I don't use the seeds that I bought from West Coast Seeds because this is a little expensive. I'm going to put beets in here for $4. Okay. Whereas when you get them from West Coast Seeds, you get a ton for a smaller price. All right. Because you want to make this economical and fun, not a mess. Because you're using a lot of seeds, right? And you spread them out on the mat like this.
So you just put those broccoli seeds in?
Yeah, same seeds, right? Now, the reason why they're less expensive than the broccoli seeds I might buy in a little package is it's not a named variety. It's broccoli. But I don't care. Okay, it's broccoli. So, all I do now is I put them under my lights, usually on another one of these upside down, and 10 days later I eat them. So it's a really good way for us to learn seeds, have fun with seeds, and to get some really great greens in your diet.
You can use any seed jar.
You can use it just about any seed you want. Most of the time the seeds that are sold are grains, okay, or brassicas, which are your things like your broccoli and kale and stuff, or your legumes, peas, beans, clover, alfalfa. Those are the primary ones that they use. Besides, they're the ones that taste the best.
And mung bean.
Mung bean,
yeah.
yep, absolutely.
And you can use bottles that have open tops.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's-
it's shaken.
Yeah, that's for the sprouts. For this, I find that this works out beautifully for me, but I've also used clamshells, anything, absolutely anything you feel like, okay? So have some fun, and I do microgreens once again, all winter, all spring, all summer. If I forget to put the top, Patrick eats them, and I have to do more, but they're Patrick. He's a great cat. But, yeah.
Yes, bring it with you.
Yeah, he gets into so much trouble. Anyway, so that's microgreens, but you can also have some fun. Because, and now this is, to me, is fun, all right? This is not serious nutrition, all right? But the big thing right now is growing things from grocery leftovers, right? So this was the bottom of a celery thing, but you see, oops, I pulled it too far. The roots are way down in there, right? So I'm just having fun growing this. But I've also grown carrot tops, and guess what celery is, and parsley is? It's the tops, right? So you can eat carrot tops. You can have fun with pineapple and avocados and lettuces. But if you're growing them to actually eat them, you have to put fertilizer in the water. Because otherwise, you're just growing water. There's no nutrients. So when people tell you that they never buy spring onions anymore because they just grow them from the tops, that's great, but you need to give them some nutrients. Okay? So, but they're kind of fun to play with, but this is the stuff that I really go for because they're just so, it's, to me, literally it's the magic of seeds that you get to play with, enjoy, eat, and learn about. And when you start doing that, when you start realizing what seeds are and how to manage them, then you have much, much better success. Okay? So I think that takes us right. Oh, by the way, if you've got lots of seedlings, please give them away. Right now, out of 50 jugs, I'm going to be giving away a lot of kale and broccolis and cauliflowers and lettuces. So share them. You know, the old joke about the zucchini, someone comes down the street with zucchini, you lock your door. Well, my neighbors lock their doors when they see me coming with seedlings. And then they lock the doors with and take them to plant exchange. For sure, everybody talks about plant exchange and it's your day lilies, take some seedlings. All right, so have some fun with that.
Where do we find things? Where do we find
That one? Oh, everywhere. Just Google. Let's see, who's got, Okotoks Garden Club is going to have one on May the 26th. Calgary Hort Society is going to have one. Millerville's got one. There's tons of them. You just find them, okay? No, not usually. No, not usually.
Like, is there something?
Yeah.
Can you show up with something?
The only thing that you shouldn't show up with is an invasive weed, okay? That's not usually considered cool. Dandelions. Yeah, someone tried to pass.
Dandelions are so good.
Dandelions.
In a salad, I mean,
Yeah.
as long as you
Yeah.
don't, you have to make sure that it hasn't flowered.
Oh, yes.
Otherwise, it's not
Gets
that
bitter.
good. When you start seeing
Yeah.
it, like cut
Yeah.
them and,
Yeah.
you know, put a little bit of, salt and
Yeah.
pepper.
They're
vinegar
great.
in it.
I use them all the time.
Spray that's been around them, yeah.
Did you know that dandelion seeds were brought to North America back in the 1500s by the settlers in Virginia, and of course they escaped across the fence, and now they populated North America.
Yeah.
So here is the power of seeds, an example, and we can eat them too. So it's great. All right, so lots of books out there. All right, these are just a couple, but Google the Okotoks Library, the Marigold Library, Calgary Library for that matter, and take out anything that says seed on it. And then you can start to read. But quite honestly, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the best seed books that you can find. This is your bedtime reading. Okay, you can read and fall asleep dreaming of all of the things you're going to grow. You can put it in your bath. You can take it to your bathtub, and then if you drop it, you just order another one. Okay, but that way you learn about seeds by osmosis as opposed to this. There's no test. Okay, no test to this. But take out all of the books and find out the ones that you like. Okay, and just have some fun reading. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you.